Hello everybody, welcome back to Mr. Rankington. Today we're going to be talking about the Jak and Daxter series. I just figured it would make sense to talk about Jak and Daxter after my previous and first video in the series talking about Ratchet and Clank, so here we go. Now like last time, I won't be counting different ports as separate rankings, I'm only just going to be mentioning them as I'm talking about a certain game. And with all that said, let's go. To start things off at the bottom, we have Jak X Combat Racing. This is probably going to be kind of controversial. Now let me start by saying this is not a bad game. It can actually be pretty fun, especially in multiplayer. But it's really hard. Like, so hard that I've only gotten past like 1 or 2 missions or levels, whatever you want to call them. That's how hard it is. Now I'm sure if I had tried to put more effort into it and I just really got into the hang of it, I could get past more than that. But given the way that this seems to have taken more notes from Jak 2 in terms of difficulty, I don't know if I can handle that frustration with a racing game. So while it is not at all a bad game, at least in terms of multiplayer, it's way too difficult in terms of single player for me to really enjoy it. Now in terms of where you should play this game, I would say play it on PS4 considering it's just the PS2 game, except there's no save data glitch like the early copies of the PS2 version, and you get to unlock all the extras automatically considering you can't connect the stuff that you would originally need to unlock those extras. So yeah, I would recommend the PS4 version. Up next is Jak and Daxter The Lost Frontier. I'll just say this is a fine PSP game and a mediocre PS2 game. Basically, the PS2 version of this game is in the same situation as the PS2 versions of Ratchet and Clank, Size Matters, and Secret Agent Clank. The only difference with this game is that it came out the same day as the PSP version. Anyway, I can appreciate what they were trying to do differently with this game compared to the other games, but I just couldn't get into it as much. Like I said, it's a fine game, it's just, it doesn't really feel as right as the PS2 games, which I know this is a PSP game, so it's not going to feel exactly the same, but I still feel like they could have done a little better. Part of the problem might be that this is running on the same engine as Ratchet and Clank Size Matters, and that's not a bad thing, it's just, well, if you've seen my previous video, you know how I feel about that game. Now, I do feel like this game is better than Size Matters, and, comparing the two, but, what's the story, the dialogue, and the script in general, it's fine, like I said a lot about this game, but compared to the previous Jak games, it's definitely underwhelming. So I would recommend this game, on PSP at least, just not over a lot of the previous PS2 Jak and Daxter games. Now for this next game, I kind of had a hard time deciding which one should go here, which one being, the weaker title of the two, and honestly, I'm going to have to go with Daxter for this one. Between this game and The Lost Frontier, obviously I think this is the better game. In fact, this is probably the best PSP game out of the Jak and Daxter and Ratchet and Clank games. But weirdly enough, it was the only one to not get a PS2 port. This was a pretty good Jak and Daxter and PSP game. Like, yeah, it's pretty different from the regular Jak games considering you're using Daxter, but they did a decent job and it still feels like Jak and Daxter. One of the only real issues I have with this game is probably the frame rate and the slowdown. This is definitely due to the limitations of the PSP, but I feel like they should have worked that out a little better. And even without the slowdowns, I do kind of feel like the game is slow in general, but other than that, this is a really good game. So yeah, I would definitely recommend this to PSP and Jak and Daxter fans. Next up on the list is Jak 2. Jak 2 is really not a game I come back to as often, and that's mainly because of its difficulty. Like, this game is infamous for its difficulty. Not quite Dark Souls infamous, but a lot of people don't like this one as much. In fact, the difficulty of this game is kind of the reason why I was debating whether this one or Daxter was the better game. Like, basically the first half of this game is challenging but mostly fair, and then the second half is just really, really frustrating. So now you might be asking, well, why is it so much higher on the list if you have so many negative thoughts about it? I didn't say it was a bad game. Underneath the mostly unfair difficulty, this game is actually really fun. I like the way it plays, I like the gunplay, I just like all the mechanics and stuff. It's just, if they had toned down the difficulty a lot, I don't know if it would be my favorite Jak game, but it would probably be my second favorite. So, while I have a lot of negative things to say about the game, it's mostly in one area, so I would definitely recommend this one. Just prepare for a hard game. The next game is Jak and Daxter: The Precursor Legacy. I didn't really appreciate this game as much as I do today back in the day, because I guess I wasn't as used to bigger collectathons, but today I really enjoy this game. Now, for those of you who know about this game, yes, it's not all that original when it comes to the gameplay, like how it feels and stuff, because it's very similar to Banjo-Kazooie and Spyro and all that stuff. I would say it's kind of a mix of Banjo-Kazooie and Spyro with a hint of Crash Bandicoot. Well, the Crash Bandicoot hint is more so in the art style and the tone of the game. But I do feel like it has enough originality to stand out on its own, and hey, at least they copied the good stuff from other collectathons. For an early PS2 game, this game looks really good, and the gameplay's pretty tight for the most part, and it's just a really fun game. Honestly, one of my only issues with this game is the issues I have with other collectathons, and that's mostly in the mini collectibles, whatever you want to call them. In this game, it's the Precursor orbs, which are basically like Banjo-Kazooie's musical notes. It's one of those things where if you don't know exactly where they are, you're going to be spending a long time trying to find all of them. But other than that, it's a really fun game. I would definitely recommend this to Jak and Daxter fans, but more so collectathon fans. And finally, we've reached the best game in the series, to me at least, and that is Jak 3. This is a beautiful game, and I'm not just talking about in terms of graphics, I mean just the way it is. Basically, they took Jak 2 and made it a lot better and put a lot more content into it. And they most certainly improved on difficulty. It definitely feels a lot more fair. And hey, you even get a whole separate new world to explore, and the one that's already there from Jak 2 is destroyed, so it's different. Basically, Jak 3 to Jak 2 is basically what Crash Bandicoot Warped is to Crash Bandicoot 2, except I come back to Crash Bandicoot 2 more than I do Jak 2 because it's a little more fair with difficulty. Is this game perfect? No, not at all, but it is definitely my favorite in the Jak and Daxter series, and it's just a really great game overall. So pretty much, if you were going to play one Jak game, I would say play Jak 3. If you wanted to understand the story, like all the callbacks and stuff in Jak 3, then you might want to play the previous two games first, but you could always just watch the cutscenes of those games and then go to Jak 3. Now, before I wrap things up, I do want to mention the other ways you can play the original trilogy, which I kind of forgot to mention when I was talking about those games. I'm not really going to be ranking them, I'm just going to be saying which ones are the best and their flaws and all that stuff. If you have a PS3, you have the Jak and Daxter collection, which is actually pretty nice. They did make it look pretty good for, HD graphics. I mean, it still looks very PS2-like, but it's like shinier in some areas, and it looks cleaned up. There are some glitches here and there, some graphical and some gameplay, but other than that, this is a pretty good collection. It's definitely one of the better ones on the PS3 of like a collection of PS2 games. Another alternative is playing these games on PS4, which they look more like the PS2 versions, not as clean as the HD collection on PS3, but the only downside to it is that really there's just some graphical issues and the frame rate dips a lot. But other than that, this is a pretty good way to go too. And as for the Vita version of the HD collection, stay away from it. These were not very good ports because they crash a lot, the frame rate dips a lot, especially in 2 and 3 where it can sometimes go to single-digit frames per second. It just wasn't very good. The only game I've been able to get through out of this collection on the Vita is the first game, and even then it still has issues. It's just the only one that I didn't just go crazy and just quit because of how many issues the other ones had. And these aren't bad ports because the Vita can't handle PS2 games, because they can. It was able to handle the Ratchet and Clank games, it was able to handle Sly Cooper, it was able to handle God of War 1 and 2. I mean, it can handle PS2 games, so I don't know what happened with Jak and Daxter. So your best bet to play these alternatively from the PS2 is either play the HD collection on PS3 or play them on PS4. It just all depends on what kind of errors you can handle more. Well, that wraps up this episode of Mr. Rankington. Go ahead and like it if you like this video, and if you want to let me know what kind of games or anything else you want me to rank, then go ahead and comment and I'll consider it. And subscribe if you want to see more of these or any other types of videos I make. And thanks for watching.